It's Brad Hodge here, and today I want to have a chat with you about research. Now, I know often when we think about research, we think that, it's complicated. It's that thing that academics do on top of the hill. It's boring, to be honest. Really, what I want to talk to you today about is about how you can simplify your research process to find answers to questions that you might want to know. Research doesn't actually need to be overly complicated. I know sometimes we make it overly complicated. It doesn't need to be overly complicated. And so I want to have a bit of a chat with you about the kinds of research and where you need to go and some of the quickest ways of finding the answers to these questions. Simple view of research. The first thing we need to realize is that it needs to be peer reviewed, all right? Now, the peer review process, really, just to make it, simple, the peer review process is basically that an academic goes away, writes a research article, does their research, comes back, hands it to a journal. That journal hands it on to two other academics who say, these are things you need to fix. As an academic, you grow really thick skin because what happens is those academics, those practitioners, they will have a look at your work and they'll pick holes in it. They'll find problems. Now, as somebody wanting to know the right answers, this is really, really good for you because it's not as if I can write a journal article and just write whatever I want, because it actually goes for review. So this is peer review. So this peer review process is really, really important. Now, so really, you want to just be engaging generally with peer review research, because you don't want to be paying attention to information you might find on Google because it could just be totally made up. Now, the other thing that's really important to remember, and remember we're taking a really simplified approach, is that there are two different kinds of research that you're probably at this point looking for. One is review literature, and the other is original. Now, this might be stating the obvious for you, but I think it's important to realize that when you're looking for answers as a practitioner, sometimes what can be really helpful is to find a paper that someone else has written where they basically review the evidence for a particular idea. So in a moment, we're going to have a go at finding some literature on nursing, burnout, well-being, and grit. We probably should come up with a better question than that, but we're probably not going to. Now, if we found a review that looked at all of the literature looking at this idea, that could be a really, really good starting point. But the other thing we want to do is we want to actually go to the original source, okay? Now, original research tends to do either experimental work, or they're doing a survey to kind of explore a certain idea. But the researcher actually has a method. They're not just engaging with the research, they're actually engaging with people. So you can understand why starting with review research would help you to understand the bulk of the literature, but having a look at original research will give you the details of what they've found. So the first thing you're going to do when you're doing research is you're going to think, okay, what's my topic? What's the area that I'm interested in? And for the sake of this, we're going to talk about nursing, or we're going to do some research on nursing. That's the first thing. Now, I go through this process if I'm doing research. Now, it's not just I want to know about nursing. That's far too broad. What I'm really interested in is to find out about burnout. And I'm also interested in this idea of well-being, I guess, as the opposite of burnout. A few other things, and think about all of the terms that might be related. We're going to go with grit, because I've done some grit research before, and grit is this characteristic of being able to, I guess, manage difficult situations. So these are our three ideas. Now, when you're thinking about your research, you actually need to map out, you might want to use a mind map like this, map out the area of research that you want to look at, because this forms your keywords when you're searching for research. So now what we're going to do is we're going to open Google Scholar. Now, you will probably have academics tell you that no, databases and are the best way to do it. And this is true. There's no question that using a database, an academic database, is definitely the best way to look for research. And if you go on to be an academic, you will no doubt do that. But for the sake of this exercise, we're looking at kind of quick and dirty ways to find the research. So what we're starting with is Google Scholar. Now, Google Scholar is quite good. You'll find lots of research. You won't find it all, but you'll find lots of research in Google Scholar. And so it's just a really easy way to engage with the literature. So if we have a look at our key terms, we've got nursing, grit, burnout, and well-being. Now, be aware that when we're in Google Scholar, we're actually accessing a huge number of journal articles. So, but the problem is that most of them are not actually what we want to look at. So if we go nursing, we see here we've got 3,390 articles, and we have a look at these titles: transcultural nursing, foundations of nursing research, blah 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 blah. We've got a huge number of things, so we really need to narrow this down. So we can put in here some of our other terms. So we might go burnout. Let's see what happens to the numbers. So all of a sudden we're down to about 320,000. That's certainly helping. We have a look at the titles: factors related to nursing burnout interventions. This is interesting. Maybe we're actually looking for interventions. Burnout and psychiatric nursing. So let's focus our question down to interventions. Now, we're getting down to 117,000. So this is getting more like it. So you can see what we're doing is we're crafting our search terms to find the articles that we're looking for. Now, often what you'll find is that you're not exactly sure what you're looking for, and you just need to create a quick and dirty search. So even from my search terms originally, I wasn't thinking properly. Interventions is certainly an interesting area. So let's go down that way and have a look. Now, the other things that you can do to, so we've got 117, but if we have a look here, we've got a review, factors related to nursing burnout, a review of empirical knowledge. Now, this doesn't necessarily look at interventions. It might. Does training in psychosocial interventions reduce burnout rates for forensic nurses? This stuff's interesting. We might want to limit it further, and there's a couple of ways to do that. So the more recent the research, the better, okay? Now, sometimes you'll have it really, really broad because there's not much research in the area, but often you're wanting to look for more recent research. So since 2016, that gives us a good 4 to 5 year window. It's reduced the numbers a little bit, but it means that our research is up to date. How else? So we might, let's say, so what we could try, and it is a trial and error process, is we could go, we just want burnout interventions. We don't want nursing interventions, we just want burnout interventions. Now, putting these speech marks around it will mean that we're looking for both the word nursing and then the combined words burnout and interventions together. So we're down to 563. Now, this may or may not be a good thing, but see here, it shows we've got burnout interventions. So we know that we're getting closer to finding our outcomes. Now, in Google Scholar, this is actually looking for information in the title and abstract. And so, you know, it's not necessarily going to get exactly what you want. You're just trying to limit it so that you can find out what you want. Now, the other thing that you can do is either and, so and, let's go grit. See what happens. 11 results. Now, this probably says that it's a little bit small, but because what and does is it says we want this word, these words, and we want this word. So here, when we have a look, we've got high levels of grit associated with less burnout interventions. So burnout interventions is appearing together. Burnout intervention and grit. So it's finding all the research that's there. Now, for the sake of showing you how to do it, you can also put or, which will look for any of these terms or the word grit. Now, this is horrible because what it's going to do, it'll bump your numbers up because it's giving you a combination of these different things. All right, so let's go back. Let's get rid of this. So you can see how that can be useful. Now, this is the process that I would suggest for finding research quickly, finding a body of research quickly. So when you're writing a paper, you actually want to choose the best research available, which means you have to read more than you're going to cite. I know this is horrifying to some of you, but you have to read more articles than what you're going to include. But you want to do that, you want to do it as quickly as possible. Now, the approach that I take when I'm opening a new area of literature, so an area that I'm not strong on, is I would go through and based on this title and abstract, I would choose 10 articles. I wouldn't read them at this point. I'd choose 10 articles and download them. So we've got grit and burnout in UK doctors. Now, if we click on it, So we get, and I'd have a quick look, grit and burnout in UK doctors, cross-sectional study across specialties. Purpose of the study, this is important, grit characterized by blah, 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 blah. And I would work out, is this paper going to help me answer my question? And probably the answer is yes. So I would download the PDF, okay? Now I wouldn't read it at this point. I'd go through and I'd find 10. Okay, find 10 articles, download the PDF if only if the title and abstract help you to answer your question. Okay. Now, the reason that this is so important is because it forces you to find a bunch of articles rather than just being satisfied with the first one. And then when you're writing, you're actually choosing the best evidence available rather than just the one that sits at the top. Okay. So this is really important. You pull those PDFs out and you have a look at them. So once you've got all 10, open the PDF. Now again, what we're looking for is answers to questions. We are not looking for, we're not looking to read this like a book, right? You can do that in your spare time. If you're working, this is about being efficient. So the first thing we're going to do is reread the abstract. Now, when you're starting a new area of research, it's really, really useful to read through the literature review, okay? You'll end up reading the whole article when you're going to use it, don't get me wrong, but when you're just looking, reading the literature review gives you the background research, okay? So it'll give you an understanding of the background research. Now, once you've done that, to be honest, at this point, you can actually skip the study design, you can skip all of that stuff and jump right to the end. I'm not saying you won't go back there and have a look later, you will, skip right to the discussion, if we can find it, discussion, and in here, you will generally find a summary of the main results, okay? So generally what writers will do will summarize their main results. Now, depending on what this says, you can read on from there. But really, this is where the results are coming from, okay? Now, when you're writing, you'll take notes on this, but when you're writing a paper, you'll end up going back and forwards to each of the articles. However, what you don't want to do is get caught digging deeply into the articles on the first read, because you don't actually know whether this is going to be relevant for you or not. So I would go through that process, taking notes of the main findings in relation to the answer to my question for those 10 articles, and then sit back and think, okay, am I capturing the right articles, or are there some other search terms I should be using? And then go back and do that process again, okay, depending on how deep you want to go. Now, once I've done that, once or twice or three, depending on what I'm writing, then I would have a look at those notes and actually start to construct my paragraphs and dig back into the research, dig back into the method section to understand how these results were come to, dig back into the method and discussion section to understand why two different papers got different results. But it's really a layered process of kind of going lightly over the top, having a look at the title and abstract first, digging into the discussion, starting to write your paper, and then digging back into the literature about how these different things came to be. Hopefully, this process will help you get it done efficiently and effectively, and you'll learn lots on the way through. Thanks. Bye.